So when you are looking at two ways of managing government and pushing government policies and government powers, you could either defuse that power so that that power is controlled and ran by the people, or you could concentrate that power so that it's ran and those decisions are made by the hands of the few. Our country has always had two ways of distributing and managing power, two different ways of governing and running government. One is a constitutional republic and one is a democracy. A constitutional republic and a democracy are not the same thing. They are not at all, not even close. They're actually polar opposites. And you got to understand, there's been a big push and a big notion of democracy in this country to move us into democracy, to accept democracy. But the only question is, if someone's pushing you into something, then they're trying to push you away from something else. And if we're moving into and towards democracy, why and what are the reasons that we're moving away from a constitutional republic? We have to look at those things. What is the political climate? What are the scales that we're dealing with? What is the powers at be? Where are they at? What are their beliefs? What is the notion? What is the feeling? What is behind the move towards this thing called democracy and moving away from a republic? Why? All across America forever, up until the last few decades and beyond, there has always been the Pledge of Allegiance that was said at our schools, opening our days at school, opening our days at work, certain corporations. We always stood up and said, "I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." There was a reason he used to do that, and nowadays there are so few schools, so few places that even acknowledge the Pledge of Allegiance or even say the Pledge of Allegiance. Very few places. My children's school are one of the few that actually acknowledge and say the Pledge of Allegiance opening their days at school. That's amazing. So what's up with a democracy? What's up with a constitutional republic? To keep it quite simple, because your homework will be to Google search republic, constitutional republic, and Google search democracy, and look at the comparing and the contrasting between them and read between the lines. When we talk about these forms of government, what are they and what do they do? When you look at a constitutional republic and a democracy, they utilize power in different ways and they concentrate power in different ways. A democracy easily concentrates power towards a handful of the few, and a republic, a constitutional republic, diffuses the power to the American people, to we the people, your citizens. So when you are looking at two ways of managing government and pushing government policies and government powers, you could either diffuse that power so that that power is controlled and ran by the people, or you could concentrate that power so that it's ran and those decisions are made by the hands of the few. For me, an individual, an entrepreneur, a business owner, an independent thinker, and an independent man, I always choose the people. Let me make my own decisions as a person and don't leave the responsibilities of my choices in other people's hands. So how do these things break down and what are they? When you talk about a constitutional republic, the job of the constitutional republic and those who have taken oaths to uphold those things, those representatives and other leaders who are in positions, who have been voted in and nominated in to certain positions of responsibility, are under the strict oath, and their job is to adhere to constitutional rights, adhere to constitutional law. So if there is something that is being brought up that doesn't align itself with constitutional law or is a violation of constitutional law, then it's thrown out. We don't like it. We don't represent it. We're not going to stand on it. But under a democracy, you can bring something to the table, and whether it's constitutional or not, it can be passed. What do I mean? Under a democracy, you have the concentration of power. All the people raise up and they go through a voting process. That means this percentage of people outvotes this percentage of people, and you get this representative. And this representative goes up against another representative, and this percentage of people outvote this percentage of people in order to get this representative in an office. And this this person in this office who represents and is supposed to be a representative of the people doesn't have to adhere to constitutional anything. They can do whatever they want. If they are bought by certain corporate interests or corporate policies, they can adhere to that. If they decide to listen to certain people and stand for constitutional rights and laws, they can stand on that. But they have no obligation to constitutional anything because they are in power. And the only way this person comes out of power after serving its full term, doing whatever it wants to do during those election years, doesn't have to be removed from office until his term is gone. That means under the time that a person we've had concentrated power into this person for them to do whatever they want to with, they can do whatever they want during that time that they are elected, and there's really nothing to stop them unless they are outvoted through some other hierarchy. But when you talk about a democracy, you're talking about a democratic government. A democratic government, that's the term, that is the definition of a democracy, democratic government. So what happens when you have a democratic form of government, but there is 50% of the country per se that is Republican based? How do they benefit a Republican system from a democratic government? It doesn't. It kind of outvotes and outpowers anything else that would come up to stand against it. So the power is concentrated. The laws, the legislation, everything is concentrated under what these representatives decide and choose on their own per se. But when you get a constitutional republic, it takes the power away from those representatives and it gives it back to the people. It distributes it among the people. And the crazy thing is when you say, well, we have the ability to vote representatives on both sides, a constitutional republic or a democracy. Yes, but under voting for both sides, the power is still with the people under a constitutional republic at all times to vote powers in and to strip those powers away. But under a democracy, you don't have that ability anymore. You've given the people the power, who are your representatives. You've taken your power, your can of Popeye spinach, given it to the representative. The representative consumes your spinach that Popeye used to consume. They get the power and you're left weak, and they do what they want to with it until their term is over. That is the big difference. So under these two forms of government, you have to consider this notion. It's possible that 51% of the people could outvote and vote away the rights of 49% of the people. If 51% of the people vote in favor of something that strips away the power, the resources, or the rights of 49%, that can be done under a democracy. But under a constitutional republic, you don't have that ability to do that, because the constitutional law and the structure of that, giving everybody power and everybody benefits and privileges, is what you are entitled to live under, because your governing body isn't a person, it's an ideology called constitutional law, which it favors and empowers the people to make their decisions. So consider that when we're talking about a democracy and we're talking about a constitutional republic, they're different. One other random. Why do you think that nowhere else in the world really wants democracy? Consider that. Neoconservatism is the term that we use in America to define the forceful act of pushing and injecting democracy into some other country or culture that does not want it, by all means necessary, by military strength and military control, making them accept democracy. Why doesn't democracy work anywhere else? Why don't people want democracy in all these other places that we consider uncivilized? They don't want it because they say, we already have a monarchy. We already have a form of government that's ran off dictatorship democracy. Why would we want that? Same thing. They don't want it because they already have it and it's not working for them the way they want it. So why did they want more of it? Just because our representatives look good and wear suits and lie good, they think that it sounds good to them when they don't want it because they're living under the same ideology, just called something different. Consider that.